If I give you a rose, that rose will wither and fall away. If I build you a castle, one day will crumble to the ground. If I love you with all of my heart, even though we are together, through death's threshold I must walk alone. Even if I build a kingdom, this kingdom will know many generations, none of which will be the same. From the moment I am born, from the moment that I die, each second I change. Tick, 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 tick. The man that I am now is not the child I was before. The child I was before was small and soft. The man that stands before you is taller, colder, closer to death. Life is filled with non-permanence and change. On a big rock, we're flying through space, hurling through space, chaos all around us. How then can one human, two humans, a group of humans, any humans, obtain any peace, any lasting happiness, any joy? How? The seed that I plant grows into a tree. The tree gives fruit. The fruit falls and rots. The tree falls and withers. More seeds are planted. More trees grow. More fruit is dropped. All to rot. All to rot. Is this our joys? Is this our hearts? Will our joys only fall to rot and pain? Are we only born to fall to the ground, cradle to grave? Are we only born to feed the flowers? Are we only born to be consumed? Are we nothing more than conscious fertilizer? Conscious fertilizer! How then can we ever achieve joy, achieve peace, achieve happiness, knowing this, that our mere existence will end with being food for another's existence? Even this that I say to you is different than what I said before. Not so funny, huh? Woo! Hello, welcome to my whatever video, I don't know what number. This one is going to be on sustainable happiness, or how to be a happy human. How to be a good human. It's all the same, really. We'll talk about that. I would like to address a couple of things, and I want to do it in a three little piggy analogy. You know the story about the three little pigs? One builds his house out of hay, one builds his house out of sticks, and one builds his house out of brick. And we're going to talk about how to build happiness and how we can build not so sustainable happiness, somewhat sustainable happiness, and pretty sustainable happiness by using that analogy. And first I'd like to talk about houses built out of hay, or very unsustainable happiness. Very unsustainable happiness comes when we put all of our happiness external to ourselves. The reason that's unsustainable is because, of course, there's all of these variables and factors that we have zero control over. If we look at just one thing in our life, we'll see the dependent nature of all things. So let's take this mala bead that you probably hear rattling. In order for me to have these mala beads, there had to be somebody cut down a tree, and then somebody had to fashion the beads out of the tree, out of the wood, and then somebody had to string these together, and these are all individually knotted. And then they had to be packaged and shipped. And I got these off the internet, so whatever company, the internet, the person had to label it and ship it, and then the fact that these were on the internet means that somebody had to put the internet in place, right? So there had to be servers and geeks and IT people, all for me. Oh, and there had to be postmen, postwomen, all for me to get these beads. All those people had to exist. Then the counters, the little counters here, these little yellow things. I bought these at the monastery, the Tibetan monastery here. So in order for me to get these, same process. Somebody had to make them, somebody had to ship them, but then the monastery had to exist, right? So that means the Buddha had to be born. And that also means that Pavasambhava had to be born and spread Buddhism to Tibet. And then, unfortunately, the Chinese army had to invade Tibet in order for the Tibetans to be exiled, for them to have monasteries here and be kind of spread out through all the world. So all of those factors had to happen in order for me to have these particular beads. I may have different beads, but those different beads would have a completely different set of circumstances leading up to me having them. Same is true of my shirt, my pants, everything. Everything in our life has kind of this dependent nature of this string of causality that led up to us having them. So if any one of those things went wrong or was different, not really went wrong, but was different in that process, then the results would be different. So the very idea that we can place our happiness in anything external then becomes kind of crazy, right? Because there's all of these circumstances. So what if my beads break? Which I broke, I don't know how many malas, but many, many malas. I've lost malas. I've lost this set of malas twice. I guess I didn't lose them because I found them, but I've dropped this set of malas outside and found them the next day twice. So there's all of these causes and conditions that go into everything that we have around us. And so everything that we have externally is incredibly fragile, people included. So if we put our happiness in other people, it's just as fragile. It's fragile in their moods, their health, all of that stuff. So that's building houses out of straw. It's very, very fragile, very hard to have any kind of sustainable happiness. And if you see people that do that because they're up and they're down and they're up and they're down, there's like, oh, I'm so happy I got, this thing, and oh no, I'm so sad because I lost this thing or I broke this thing, or I'll be happy when I get this thing, or all that stuff. So that's very unsustainable happiness. So take a look at yourself and see how much you do that, how much you depend on external circumstances to cause you happiness. And anytime you do that, you're building your happiness out of straw. And the winds of change are going to come like the big bad wolf and blow it away. Woo! So the second way of building happiness is building it out of wood, which is a little bit more stable, but still not completely stable. And that's when we become radically self-reliant and we decide that we don't need anybody but ourselves. We're going to do everything ourselves, and we're going to try to control our environment. And people do this in an effort to kind of offset this idea of this interdependence. So, and you see people do this. The people that try to acquire a lot of wealth and a lot of power and a lot of influence. They're really trying to kind of control their life so that they don't, they do not experience these loss or this change. So it is a little bit more sustainable because you aren't necessarily relying so heavily on external influences. But again, because of the dependent nature of everything, there's no way to escape the dependence that we have on people. And for instance, if you acquire a lot of money, you're still going to have to deal with banks and the IRS and all these things, and that wealth can go away just like that. And if you have a company, then you have to deal with employees, and again, the government and regulations and the IRS. And so, again, you can have one employee that's real important, and they could go just like that. So there's still always going to be factors that we cannot control. In fact, we're on this big planet that's being hurled through space at several million miles per second. We have no control over what happens. We have no control over the weather. We have no control over this planet. We have no control over about what our country does, unless we happen to be Obama or somebody else with influence. So there's all of these factors that we have zero control over. So as much as we try to control things, we're not going to be able to. The other really vulnerable part of that then is then we cannot enjoy any of our success because we're too engaged, we're too fear-based, we're too engaged in our fear, because that whole process of trying to control and micromanage and is fear-based. It's out of this fear that things will change, that we will be subject to change, and that we will experience pain then. So again, when you really look at it, it's the same mentality as, if I have this, oh, I'm so happy because I have this thing, and oh no, now I'm not happy because I lose it. But with the second way of building a house, there's this other component of, I need to control my circumstances out of fear of losing this thing. So Geshe Pende likes to say that people are stressed because they don't have a job, and then people are stressed because they have a job. And it's that kind of thing. People get stressed because they have no money, and then they get stressed when they have money because they're like, oh my gosh, I'm fear of losing it then. So that leads us to the third way of building happiness, which is out of brick, which is the most sustainable way. And to build a structure out of brick, you're going to require assistance because the bricks are heavy. And so sustainable happiness deals with realizing, first of all, and accepting that change is constant. And there's this dependent nature that we have with other sentient beings, with all other beings on the planet. And so it kind of starts with that. And so we begin to work towards happiness and also recognize and understand that other people are also working towards happiness. And if we can help them in that process, we will, because then they'll in turn help us. And I'm not talking about a favor for favor thing. I'm not saying you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. I'm talking about bigger than that. I'm talking about true altruism. Because if I help other people achieve happiness, and so I've got happy people around me, then naturally my life is going to be more happier. Let me give you an example of this. If you've ever been somewhere and one person walks in the room that's like a total downer, and they're like, oh my gosh, my life is so blah blah blah, they'll bring down the mood just like that. Another person comes in and they're very up and they're very happy and they're like, hey, how's it going? It brings the room up like this. So that's just on a microcosmic scale. But if we put that in a bigger perspective, in the sense that everybody that we meet, we understand that they're also working towards happiness, and we're going to help them to achieve their happiness because we are also working for happiness. Then we become surrounded by these people that are hopeful, that are ambitious, that are happy, that are uplifting, So to help others achieve their happiness really in the long run helps us to achieve our happiness. And then there is that tick for tack thing that happens, of course, because if you plant a cherry tree, you'll get cherries. If you plant a cherry tree and expect an apple tree, it won't happen. And what I mean by that is people that think they're going to be successful by hurting other people, it doesn't work. It may work short term, but in long term, it's not going to work because you're planting cherries and expecting apples. It's going to, we can get into the whole law of karma and everything, but let's just talk physics. The nature of causality is that if I throw a ball this way, it's going to go this way. If I throw a ball this way, it's not going to go this way. So if I lie, cheat, steal, and hurt, and manipulate in order to achieve things, then my outcome is going to be short-lived. Or my good outcomes are going to be short-lived because I'm throwing a ball this way and I'm expecting it to go this way. Does that make sense? Okay. So when we build our happiness in the form of a brick house, we're first of all recognizing that we're going to need help. And so we're going to help other people build their houses as well, because that becomes part of our overall goal. The other thing is we recognize immediately the non-permanent nature of all things. And we recognize it and we accept it. And we also see that is where its beauty comes from. A flower is, we were just talking about this last night, a flower is beautiful because it's temporary. Tulips are amazing because we only get to see them for like a week and then they're gone every year. So, but if we saw them all year round, they wouldn't be as pretty. They wouldn't be as beautiful. And so we have to kind of adopt that mentality. We accept that out of flowers, but we don't accept that in our life. We think that we're going to have whatever it is all of the time, and if we don't, we're going to be unhappy. That very idea is what causes us to be unhappy. If we recognize that we have this thing for this moment, and we can enjoy it for this moment, then all that fear doesn't arise, all that controlling doesn't arise, and we're able to have more sustainable happiness. And then when it goes away, sure, we're going to grieve, but our overall energy is going to be, I'm grateful that I had it for the length of time that I did. And now it's time for something different, something new. I take a lot of life lessons from my tech background, and one of the things that I always thought in the tech industry was if something breaks, it's time to upgrade. And so I kind of feel that about life too, that if something goes wrong in my life, it's time to upgrade. It's time to move on to something else. So it's kind of a cool way to approach life. And that's definitely a way of building happiness in a like a brick house. It's definitely more sustainable because you're not so subject to all the change and everything. I mean, you are. It's still going to happen. Change is inevitably going to happen. But you are like this brick house because you're like, yeah, things are going to change. Seasons come, seasons go. Sun rises, sun goes down. People live, people grow, people die. Everything is subject to change. Cradle to grave, baby. Cradle to grave. So if we understand that and we accept it and we roll with it, then that's sustainable happiness. Then we can have more happiness in all of our circumstances. The Dalai Lama said, if you are happy poor, then you'll be more happy rich. If you're miserable poor, then you'll be more happy poor, or more miserable rich. And what he meant by that was if the things that I'm doing to make me happy as a poor person, I'm going to do more of as a rich person, and so I'm going to be happier. The things I'm doing to make me miserable as a poor person, if I become wealthy, I'll be doing more of those things and I'll become more miserable. So, what he was trying to say really is that our happiness really has to do with the way that we perceive our reality, the way that we approach life. And it has little or nothing to do with external circumstances. I mean, of course, if we're hungry and we're cold and we're injured, those are going to influence our circumstances for sure, of course. I mean, we have to be realistic. But to think that I'm not going to be happy until I have an iPad is a little ridiculous when you think about it. So anyway, this is how you build sustainable happiness. If you're building your happiness out of hay, then you're expecting the external world to make you happy, and it's going to be completely subject to change, and you'll never have sustainable happiness. You'll experience constant ups and downs. If you build your happiness out of wood, you're going to try to micromanage everything and control your environment in order to basically damage control. But then you're going to be ruled by fear, and you're never going to be able to enjoy your happiness, and you're still going to be subject to the ebbs and flows of life, and you're never going to have sustainable happiness. If you change your perception and realize that change occurs, it's a natural part of life, and to accept each moment as it comes and try to enjoy each moment as it comes and try to help other people achieve their happiness, then you'll have true sustainable happiness, and you'll smile way more than you'll frown, and you're definitely are on a brighter path. So I hope this talk is coherent, and I hope it made sense, and I hope somebody got something out of it. Know that I definitely want you to be happy, my roses. Peace out.